Good afternoon, Abbotsford residents. I'm Mr. Pelican. I'm running for the mayor of Abbotsford to open the city's books on the insider trading and the organized crime. It's well documented of what I want to do for my town and bring the RCMP in. You can see how much the Abbotsford Private Police were friends and hold down criminal reports on an attempted murder with a vehicle in broad daylight with all witnesses. The Mennonite mob was running the town, as Pierre Apolli had called them, the M&Ms, and lifting jobs. Henry Braun is well tied at the top of the political field, and he would be doing everything now to keep the RCMP out from opening up insider trading and lifts to jobs. In my opinion, he'd be calling David Eby and saying it brings some of the largest construction companies that I set up to buy land and manipulated and partners with down. And Henry knows that I know he would be lobbying David Eby to get them grants and the condo bales out for Ron Funk and his friends. He knows that I know that Henry Braun is tied to David Eby, and he would be leveraging on David Eby. That's why we don't have an investigation into Barrowtown's Jake's contract doing that job 4 times and taking the money off the farmers, and Dave Sidhu's property insider trading and everything else. Remember, Henry made sure that David Eby pointed him to Kamloops, and Darren Braun said it was because of Tobinano, the Versus big site up there, and they needed that mayor out of there. What are I doing? I'm on Gladys Avenue, right here by the Hub gas station of Ross Siemens, and I want Mrs. Siemens and your family and your dad to see this. When Henry went in to set up the mayor, he needed Ross Siemens to keep the official community plan, and he used Ross to do it. Now Ross went along with it all. He knew Henry's attempted murder. He knew that his team and him made false accusations to wreck somebody's life by saying, I grabbed that old witch, Sandy Blue, that's now pointed to the police board, up the dress. He knew what Dave Sidhu was doing, and Mrs. Siemens, I'm sure you can figure it out. Ross ain't taking a picture with Dave Sidhu. He'll blame everything to Dave Sidhu because that's how weak this man is. This is how this weak and pathetic he is. He'll roll it off, and I bet you, in my opinion, he's probably going to try to convince his wife and kids that I did it for you. I went into all this organized crime for you because I wanted you to have a better life and go to school and make up. He didn't do it because he was a Christian and for the town. No, he's going to probably play that card too on his wife. And you could see it. Everybody knows that. You could see when Jake Siemens came and saw me just right here, and we had lunch together. A wonderful man on the shit his son was doing. He knew what he was doing for Henry Braun. He knew when he damaged the homes. He knew on the Mackenzie Bog and everything. Henry needs to load him again, and this is why you see Henry with Patty Ross. And he needs to load him again because of the official plan that he set up, and you can see Darren Braun and everything. So what are I doing on Gladys Avenue? Ross Siemens went into the city of Abbotsford and he embezzled the money out on taxpayers for all these rocks. He didn't come forward with a plan. Then he was going to try to blame it on Peter Speranese and housekeeping. And what them rocks were was thousands of dollars that could have went to the farmers for cleaning the ditches and helping the farmers. He embezzled it to go from one end of Gladys by his gas station all the way to the other end. Then he cut down the Tree of Hope under the Salvation Army, and Patty Ross, you could see her, where rather than Vicky Hope's write an article and say she's supposed to be an activist, she shuts her mouth because Henry needs that old witch to run now and get in too. And what were these rocks for? It was to halt the sales would go down on Rob Funk's illegal job site, Sage, because of the homeless are there. And when city informers told me that, I had to sit back and say that this was going to happen to politicians. They said, Ross ain't that stupid. I said, Ross doesn't run the city, Henry is. And anything that affects Henry's jobs, he'll manipulate Ross to go and do it. So they embezzled all this money. They didn't survey and engineer the bank like they wanted. Remember when they went after Ted Dykeman, they said that for the $7,000 he needed to have engineering the bank. And they loaded it on the city's buffers, and they scattered the homeless everywhere. And what it was financial gain to help rob Funk's sales office, which Henry was partners in. And that is why the rocks went all the way from one end to the other end. And then to cut the tree of hope down there and move all of them so they could get the pipelines and everything through. And they changed the zoning and they lifted it. This wasn't no longer about sitting in the city and rigging a decision to make a little bit of money off of. It got into organized crime. And they believed as elected officials, because the private police, which they owned 100%, 100%, and you could see it. Colin Watson is so screwed up, he don't know which way to go. He's running from the Liberals to the Conservatives to the NDP to anywhere he can to please save me and my freaking garbage man. Please, my big fentanyl guys and his crackheads. He realizes now his ass and his guys are in trouble. And they'll do anything. They went as far as using violence and beating politicians to save the company. And this was an SS, just like Adolf Hitler. And they know that Henry's the engine of it. And they halted all criminal investigations and reports of everything because it was done from the political thought. Pardon me. Ed Fast, Henry's best friend, Ed's son-in-law, Devin Roy, into Diverse, Rom Funk, Pacific Geek Homes with Sage, and then I showed you Mike Young, I showed you them all, up the top. And so what they did not need was any information to get out. So Henry ordered his friends that were his personal friends in the Abbotsford Police, investigators and sergeants, to halt down all criminal charges against him. And then he ordered them to start threatening using the task force in that. And believe to the community and to the world that these shithole fucking garbage men that run around in that uniform would have sympathy and be protected every day. Maybe you could, if you could prove it was a conspiracy. But the evidence was overwhelming thanks to the mission men and women in the RCMP and many politicians. There's no such thing as saving this shit and listening to this garbage Colin Watts. This now is about their ass and their jobs. And their own wives are going to realize that you did this for this millionaire. You targeted them people. You left Mr. Pelican for dead and you wouldn't do criminal reports because you were kissing Henry's ass and politicians' ass. There's no longer a police force and you didn't have the bailout now of the RCMP leading beside you because they pissed on you knowing what was right. They had no choice. The RCMP worry about revenge and what you're going to do when you're being framed and blackjacked and you know who's setting you up. They knew that Henry was ordering the Abbotsford Police at all times to pull me over, drug traffic me and that. And with them great men in the mission RCMP, they helped me have dignitaries and they helped me have everything. There's no chance for this fucking Abbotsford RCMP or Abbotsford Police to survive, pardon my language, none at all. They brutalized this town. These are sick, garbage trash men now that, oh, I'm an investigator. Please kiss this ass. They knew what they were doing from day one. And then they figured as the police and in the uniform, Henry figured you'll never get caught or questioned. It was that good of a plan. Would have been if Darren Braun wouldn't have came forward. No one would have ever suspected that this brutal shit was taking place with the Abbotsford Police. So I want to tell Colin Watts this today. With your filthy man that sit there with Amric Moran that you're promoting to be a city council. That the private party for Amric Moran with Corky Neufeld, Simon Gibson and everybody. The catering with Amric Moran because he's one of you. He came off the dirty police board and he's one of you and you need him in for city council to protect your filthy company. I suggest you get in your own car, not a company's car, and you start driving around of everything that I've podcasted in these rocks. And as a police force, that was taking city taxpayers' dollars. And that was insider trading to help the developer, and everybody knew that. And then magically, police chief, magically, all of a sudden, city manager Peter Sparanese retired. He didn't. He used retirement as an excuse when he knew Dave Sidhu's property was insider trading and city dollars were being used for the developer. And as an engineer, and the city has a lawyer, you have an oath to call it out. And he knew he couldn't go against them and he couldn't go against Ross and that. So what is the easiest thing? I'm retiring. I'm going to call quits now. And now, they didn't throw a party, they didn't picture him and nothing. The Abbotsford Community Police were no longer a police force for the law. They didn't represent the law. They were manipulators. They used it. And that is why I can look through them and say, I don't think they died in the line of duty. I don't think anything they put out for the social media is that. I know 90% of crime not being solved in Abbotsford is their own guys that they're covering for and friends they know. If Henry paid them and got him to do this. Since I've been podcasting, remember when Bob Rich used to come out and Henry forced him, it looks good if the police chief nags. Get the police chief to nag. Get that loser Bob Rich. And he got Bob to nag, Darren Braun showed me. Fentanyl, 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 fentanyl. 9,000 people died last night. 20,000 were submitted to the hospital. And I started checking. Nobody was in the hospital. He was using the police chief and bullying on the province, hoping he could get the money from the province to build a bigger police building and award it to the contractors. Then he came up with the plan to use Unitech and embezzle the money when Darren Braun showed for $5 million. And he used his chief to manipulate it. And when I started running podcasts and showing Vicky Hopes was covering and doing this because she was at Henry's house and they were all friends, this little ring, crime dropped, fentanyl dropped, I don't see a chief, they don't go behind Walmart, no more homeless or nothing because the chief wasn't doing for the law, the chief was doing what he needed to do for Henry. Then you could see the same MO, let me tell you the same MO right now, is that loser MP, Brad Viss. And you could see him constantly about the flood money, constantly bailing the flood money. Now he'll back off a little bit about the flood money for Henry and his friends, and he'll start trying to get Amrit Moran in, because when we get counsel, then we can push to dig that big pond that we want to propose to hold the nukes at. Brad Viss knew Dave Seduce Properties insider trading. He knew about these rocks, and his friend is Eric Nivel. And didn't he come down and visit Nivel? And he knew all about this. He knew the Mackenzie Bog. He knows Darren Braun is Henry's son in Blue Sky and all the developments. He knew Ross Siemens' gas stations right there, and he tugged it into Brad's riding, and they were manipulating him. And Brad figures I'll never get exposed or get caught. Darren Braun opened that door that these political people at the top were involved in these job sites for millions and trillions of dollars. Now they couldn't operate it in any other town but where the private police are. They set it up from the back, and then they had the private police to halt investigations, criminal investigations. Now we got the leading fat slobs, the Safety Standards Act and Abbotsford Police do not know where to start. They don't know where to go, so they just drive around town looking like stupid zombies all day long. How do we charge Henry? How do we open an investigating on Darren Braun and Blue Sky for insider trading and taking the information? How do we go after Ron Fong? They screwed themselves in the corner. And that is why I argue from day one, we need the RCMP. They come in and they wipe them out and they do the criminals. And this clown, this stupid clown with Paul Walker and Colin Watts sits there and he tries to argue the fact that he offers Abbotsford a service. This joke, he's in such turmoil, the company, for the better of the community, he won't even say, I'm stepping down, it needs the RCMP, because it's greed. The guy's based on greed. So he figures if he goes and kisses Superman Gill's ass, kisses Alex Mitchell's ass, kisses Brad Viss's ass, it goes away. You're dealing with attempted murder in broad daylight. You're dealing with criminal reports that got blocked purposely by the Abbotsford Police for the Friends. But you're dealing with massive fraud. And this is how they were setting it up. I'm on Gladys Avenue. I encourage you all to come down and have a look at that money that was frauded out under the mayor for Ron Funkaddiverse. I'm live, Abbotsford, British Columbia.